Cairo Mafia with my brother from another mother and a new brother, man. It's like a new stepbrother. I'm sure your name does end in a vowel. So that is important. There's qualification there. And so great to have you with us, Dr. Bob. And man, I'm really excited for your story. You had me as a guest on your podcast. Sure, it was like couple of weeks ago, and I was fascinated. We've kind of been two ships in the night at CBP for a while. My impression was the very engineering personality, and then to find out how spiritually evolved you are, I'm like, man, I'll have to know your story. So here we are on Cairo Mafia now. So welcome.
Well, thank you for that. Spiritually evolved, that'd be a heck of a title. How about ever evolving? Uh,
Yeah.
Listen, some of your stories, you hit the pinnacle of the evolution. But like you said, then we come back to reality and lose that step of faith. But we need to get it back and hang with each other where we can keep each other accountable to fight the good fight, which I know you both do. So,
Yeah.
yeah, very, very interesting. I started out basically with a math and science background. I early on, I took some tests and they said, you'd be a pretty good engineer. Planted that seed. I didn't know what an engineer did. I had a scholarship to a pretty elite school and thought, well, let's do it. But,
Okay, so what elite school was that? Because you're humble.
Milwaukee School of Engineering, which, by the way, they call themselves the MIT of the Midwest, 99.9% job placement at time of graduation.
Oh,
Wow.
To be in faculty, you have to have 7 years experience in engineering. And that model should spill over, I would hope, for all of education, because too often we've got people that didn't succeed in their field trying to teach people to succeed in that field.
You mean like chiropractic schools?
Well, you know what? There were
Did
some
I say that? I don't
there
think I said
were
that.
some exceptions there,
Yeah, there are.
but for the most part, that was the story, wasn't it? Right? We had a couple of sages that were 70 and 80 years old that had added value to the world for 50 years. And then they said,
Yeah.
okay, maybe my arms and shoulders aren't holding out, but my brain's still good. And that they paid that forward. But we both had the experience that there were people that didn't really get it themselves, but they were sharing what they did get. And sometimes that was to the detriment of the students.
That was the problem.
So, yeah.
So cool. So did you go to that? Did you went to that engineering school?
I did. I finished my degree in electrical engineering. And what's fascinating, when I was a junior, I was playing in a city football league and I got hurt. And, just a bad shot, separated shoulder, what they would classically call the pinched nerve in the neck, rotator cuff injury. And I went to the medical doctor, and what he did is he gave me muscle relaxers and painkillers. Put my arm in a sling, my neck in a brace, and said, yeah, okay, maybe come back in 3 weeks or whatever he said. Well, I had never taken medication, wasn't very responsible. I had one of their pain pills, which was probably an opioid, went out and had one drink on a date and fell asleep behind the wheel of my car at 55 miles an hour. So my date
wasn't in the car.
Grabbed me, shook me. Yeah, thank God she was, alert and ready. And I pulled over. She said, what happened? I said, I passed out. She said, I'm driving home. I get home. I pick up that bottle that says, don't mix with alcohol, don't operate heavy machinery. And I thought, holy cow, this stuff nearly killed me. So I flushed it down the toilet. And the next day I went back to the gym. Always enjoyed being a gym rat. And the gym owner looked at me and says, you look like you've been hit by a train. I said, yeah, that's about how I feel. He said, well, you need a good chiropractor. I did not even know what a chiropractor was at that moment in time. And I said, can you recommend one? He recommended Mike Wickers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who was working with the Olympic speed skating team. And as I say, he helped me so much so fast. It literally made my head spin, literally he gave me just a powerful cervical adjustment, and I laid there and I didn't move. Just that classic pinched nerve in the neck. And when he made the adjustment, I laid there and he looked at me and said, are you okay? I said, I don't know. Did you break my neck? He says, no, move it around. So I'm moving it. Also, he goes,
and then you do a Linda Blair.
The other way, right? And I mean, so much relief so fast. We probably have experienced it. Many of our patients have experienced, but I just said, what happened? Why did that work? And, literally he showed me my film. I had the S-shaped curve in my neck, right? So clearly that wasn't right when you look at normal. But he was very diplomatic. I said, okay, why didn't my other doctor tell me about this? And he just said, we're trained differently. And so if you're trained with suppressing symptoms, which hey, we can give them credit, they can suppress symptoms.
Yeah.
But if we're getting after cause and effect, that's what we do. So if I just keep rambling about that, I started thinking about chiropractic right away. My
You know,
dad.
let me interrupt. I
Sure.
can't say that when people said, "How come my MD didn't say that?" I can't say I would always give such a diplomatic answer.
Yeah. Well, we could go.
Diplomacy wasn't always my strongest skill.
Well, let's face it. They were convicted at the level of the Supreme Court
Oh
with
yeah,
an antitrust violation, trying to destroy the competitive profession, and they got essentially the slap on the wrist.
yeah.
And so it did that deter him? Not that I can tell, not that you can tell. So what are we up against? Well, I like being a broad reader and deep in philosophy. And there's a book called Lessons of History, written by an author named Will Durant, who may be the greatest historian ever. And he had the lessons of money. And he said, men who will manage men who can only manage things, but men who manage money manage everything.
Wow.
So many breaks went to the billionaire, trillionaire class in pharma, spelled with a PH, that they have all the laws favorable to them at the expense of, for the most part, an unknowing population. You know, people are so brainwashed at this point that they think the answer might be in a pill, but it never has been. It never will be.
No, it's energy healing, man. Cool. Okay, so then you're like, oh my God, I think now you just graduated engineering school. You're an engineer. You get adjusted, do a Linda Blair, like metaphorically, mean a paradigm shift.
Yep.
Then what happened, man? Like, okay, I want to be a chiropractor. You know?
Well, so I did work as an engineer. First, I worked at General Motors in Wisconsin. Then I moved to Texas, which is where I am now, and worked for Texas Instruments. You know, there was a pretty good investment in terms of time and effort to getting that degree. And I thought, well, let's at least figure it out. I went to school, and then I can picture it like it was yesterday. There was an absolutely beautiful woman talking about time management. At least that's was the title of the course. Her name was Diane Dorsey. Walk into a room. She's very well dressed, very eloquent. And she said, okay, first and foremost, there's no such thing as time management. You can only manage activity. And then she said, now, how do you manage that activity? Well, hopefully you choose what's important to you. So she said, make a list 1 through 10, and write down what's most important to you. And I did that, right? She said, I'll give you 2 minutes. So God, self, family, health, fitness, travel, adventure, financial freedom, contribution. She said, okay, look at your list. If you're not spending your time on what's important to you, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your life. And I
Wow.
literally looked at my list and I thought, I'm wasting my life. I don't want to spend the next 50 years doing this. So I just thought for a moment, all right, so this is not for me. What is for me? And I looked at chiropractic. That's the first thing that popped in my head. I pulled out the phone book. Some of the listeners will remember phone books. Yellow
Yeah.
pages, opened up to chiropractors. And what do I find? Texas Chiropractic College, right basically in the same town, right? Just outside of Houston. And so I called them, told them my background, and they said, wow, well, that sounds like you'd be a good chiropractor. Send us a transcript. We'll let you know what you need. And Fred, God has a way of opening doors for us, right? When it's the right
Oh yeah.
path. So when I had that course on a Friday, deciding on the weekend that I was quitting, I walk in Monday and there was a electronic message on my desk. It was on paper from a pre-internet type thing. This was the 80s, right? It was called a Twix system. And the president of Texas Instruments said, due to changes in the economy and the environment for business, we are having a voluntary layoff. Anybody who wants can volunteer for layoff. You'll get a severance package and be immediately available for unemployment. So the
Wow.
day I decided to quit, they paid me to quit. I literally walked into my boss's office. I said, does this apply to me? He says, it applies to everybody. I said, well, let me tell you my story. I told him about Diane Dorsey and, my priorities. He says, sounds like you're making the right decision. And you know what? I
Wow.
never looked back. So just like that, everything lined up just right. And I never did look back. And one thing that you'll appreciate is, I called my chiropractor back in Wisconsin. He gave me a good letter of recommendation. And I said, I want to be a good chiropractor. What do I need to do? And he said, learn from good chiropractors. Right
It's
now
pretty
I went to a
simple.
school where everybody had 7 degrees in experience or 7 years in industry. And I said, Well, isn't that what I'm going to school for? He says, Bob, unfortunately, people that actually know what they're talking about in school, in my experience, are few and far between. So go out in the community, find every successful chiropractor you can, offer some kind of trade, clean their office, do something, but just get to spend an hour or two with them and see what their secret sauce is. And so we had the conversation when I interviewed you for my podcast. Probably the most enlightening conversation is you've got to show up and be there with the patient with nothing but pure intent in your heart and get out of the way and let the power that made the body heal the body, right? We can go right back to BJ for that. And the better I do that, certainly the better patient outcome. Now, do I need to remind myself? Yeah, I'm human. I know you have a little bit of a Jim Parker background, and he said, look, I'm going to get that present time consciousness every time I walk in the room, and I'm going to be there. And when you do that, you're going to have a great outcome, whether it's a patient, a friend, a stranger, right? If you're literally there serving from the heart, I can't imagine anything but great things happening.
Well, I remember I was going to DE, and Fred Schofield was speaking on a Friday night, and he just flew in, and he had seen 500 people the day before. And then somebody asked him, he said, somebody asked me, how do you see 500 people? And he said, one at a time. And I'm like, that changed everything. That's present time consciousness, right? And I thought, that's what I'm going to do, man. And I remember going back, and I had to open a dressing room with a few tables, but thinking everything outside that table was blurred. You're just there with that person, make 60 seconds feel like 15 minutes. And then
Yeah.
that's the healing experience. That's the adjustment with the extra something is the intent,
But it
right?
comes down to, are you I got a little bit of a cold, I apologize. The Are you a treater or are you a healer? That's what I always say. You're treating them or you're healing them, so there's a difference. Is what you're doing, do you think in what your head you're doing is to treat it, or do you think you're removing any obstruction or interference that's allowing the body to work the way it's supposed to move towards health, to healing? So, and that mindset, I mean, some people get that and some people don't, but when you really get that, and you step out of the way, and your educated mind, as BJ talked about, right, and you let the body do what it's supposed to, you let innate do what it's supposed to. I mean, that's when the real miracles really they really start to happen. And people get it at a different level, because you're not pushing down the idea that what I'm doing is treating. You're pushing down the idea that, hey, I'm involving myself in something far greater than both of us, in order for your body to do what it's supposed to do. And so they're much more patient, they're much more in tune, they're much more in alignment with that whole type of conversation. And it changes everything for them and for your practice, for sure. So
Absolutely. I remember thinking, I want to build a big practice, and then thinking, well, who had the biggest hands-on healing practice? Obviously, Jesus, right? And I'm like, how did he walk into a town and then walk through a town and have thousands of people following him? And that's when I figured out, if I talk like a healer, then a lot of people are going to show up and want to be healed. Right. And that's what builds your practice. You always say your spirit builds a practice, systems handle the flow. Right. So, and that changed everything.
Yeah, that's profoundly well said. And so you keep looking at that, and I guess that's the biggest question that I would have is, what's the best way to renew that consciousness in every interaction with every person every day? Or is that too big a standard, right? Because let's face it, life throws us some curveballs. I need to remind myself often, okay, whatever just happened, let that go. Let's be here now with this person, this conversation, everything else. So do you have any special hacks for that? That might be a fun conversation.
Yeah, the whole healed system that we just talked about before,
Yep.
man. Like you say, well, is that too big of a standard? You mean really desiring to be who God created you to be, and actually knowing and becoming conscious of that, at least in moments? Is that too big of a standard to be who you really are? So
when you put it that way, that's right.
Yeah, that is your standard. That's who you are, just clear all the shit out of the way, right? Basically your whole humanity.
Yeah.
have your humanity and divinity come together. So on that note, when did you begin? Well, you began your spiritual evolution really the minute you came into the body
Sure.
and came out of the womb. But what initiated all that? Give us the story on that.
Well, I think if you have a genuine hunger for a complete and totally successful life, you realize that life has multiple areas: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, financial, impactful. And then you might ask, okay, what is the abundance of me? Well, I'm on a physical planet, so I want to have physical health and vitality. But what am I mostly? Empty space filled with spirit. And what can that spirit do? Bob Proctor, he said in a way that I got it better than anything. He says, when you're partnered with infinite, anything and everything is possible. So why wouldn't we honor that partnership all along the way? And so spirituality and religion can be definitely different. My parents, I'll call them religious and spiritual at the same time. They grew up in the Catholic Church. We'd never miss mass. That would just always be the way it would be. But there were some things I saw that didn't quite resonate with me, and that's probably true of a lot of people if they actually have both eyes open or looking what's going on. So when I started Spiritual Quest, I started talking to mentors that I really felt had it all. They had the good life, they had the good health, they had the success, and they had that peace of mind. In fact, one of my favorite definitions of success is inner peace, outer progress. And that's a really good place to be. And the people that had the inner peace had the spiritual life dialed in. So it was the early 1990s. Zig Ziglar, I was at one of his events in person. He says, I challenge you, read the Bible cover to cover in person and see what it does. And some of it's a tough read. You get to that Old Testament and you read these old laws and, okay, where is there value in this? But I plowed through. I went, Genesis 1:1 all the way through the end of Revelation. It took me, most of the 12 months, but I was a different person at the end of that. You come to realize, okay, wait a minute, there's a lot more to this earth than meets the eye. Is some of the Bible story and metaphor? Probably. But is there a lot of wisdom and truth in there? There is. And I would challenge people the same thing. Read it cover to cover, see what happens to your life.
Yeah. I remember doing that, man. I read it cover to cover 4 times, and the King James version is like, what are they talking about? But you're also reading it at the level of your consciousness.
Right.
So I don't know. Was I different? Yeah, that I don't think that was the most impactful. The most impactful were the experiences. And I guess I didn't know back then how to turn knowledge into experience as much, but the experiences in deep prayer, and having revelations when you pray for wisdom, God doesn't even hesitate. You know what I mean? Like you pray for things, pray for conditions, but when you pray for wisdom, that's when you have really intense experiences. And in those experiences, I talked about that on your podcast, Bob, 3 out of body experiences with Christ. And those were deep, sincere, heartfelt desire to want to know, not had nothing to do with conditions, just the desire for wisdom.
I've had a handful of people that had the near death experience.
Yeah,
Two
absolutely.
during COVID and one, long before, actually had an abdominal aneurysm rupture, and the guy survived, amazingly enough.
Wow.
But on the way out, they all said the same thing: just profoundly peaceful. And I guess people can look at that. What's left after this? I'm trying to think of what book I was reading. Maybe it was a John Maxwell book. And there was a woman that was dying. She was at the end of her life, and she was making arrangements for a funeral. And she said, well, I want to be buried with a fork in my hand. And
Nice.
let people see that, right? I don't know if you heard that one, and the answer was why? Well, she'd always hold her fork in her hand, knowing that when dessert was coming, the best was yet to come. And that was, one of her own messages to herself: the best is yet to come. And she wanted him to tell the story, right? As she was in the casket with the fork. And, for many of us, the best is yet to come. We just need to put ourselves in a position to receive it. And maybe even, as you're showing, get it here and now while we're here, because it is possible.
Absolutely.
There's people that are living in the moment, sharing from the heart, helping a lot of people and enjoying the journey as much as possible.
I always get into this disagreement with my wife. It's not an argument, it's more like a humorous disagreement. She goes, you're not going to want it. You're not going to want food in heaven. I'm like, oh, yeah. No, I want eggplant parmesan. I want meatballs. You're not going to want food. There's no meatballs in heaven. I go, I don't know what heaven you're going to, but I'm going to the Italian heaven. If I can have anything I want, I'm eating meatballs and eggplant parmesan.
Yeah, that's great.
And I always tell my mom, she's 4'11". She eats more now at 87 than most grown men. And she will definitely, like when people give up, oh, I don't want to eat, and now they get all depressed. I'm like, hell no, man. My mom's gonna eat right to the end. She could be depressed, she could be anything, she could give up on life, and she will eat right to the end.
That's
Well,
all Italians, man. I mean, I don't care what it is, your family, no matter what situation is, it's a time to eat. You're depressed, you had something good happen, somebody died, somebody got married, you got a promotion, you lost your job. Come on in, they have something. It is so
It
funny.
always makes you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
well, especially that Italian food, right? We're going to give you the high marks on that, whether we're talking about that eggplant parmesan, your excellent pizza, the gelato. I don't know if you guys created all that, but wow.
Yeah.
You have the
So
niche on that.
what were very profound spiritual experiences for you? Well, reading the Bible was one, but I'm sure you've had many. What are really profound experiences that really stand out that you felt like really jumped your evolution?
Bob, before you answer that, I did want to, and you're gonna get into this, but did you find in the profound experiences that you receive them or observe them only because you read the Bible, that you were able to, that you were in a different, like Fred was saying, your consciousness was different, so therefore you're more likely to observe it and experience it, or so just.
Well, I would think that have to be the case and ever evolving. We don't know what we don't know, but as we learn more, and again, it is a total evolution there, and even moment to moment. But I think a lot of us, or all of us, maybe have had near death experiences, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And I happen to be not my daughter's now 26, so it was 20 years ago. We were out in the country on a four-wheeler, and there was a two-lane highway that we were riding near, and then a big drainage ditch across the highway. And anyways, my daughter wanted to go fast. I opened up the four-wheeler as fast as it could possibly go. As we were approaching this highway, had complete and total brake failure. And so now I'm going too fast to turn. I'm going across the highway between cars. I somehow go between the cars and they miss, right? They did hit their brakes and beep their horn, but fortunately they didn't hit. Then I'm going into a very deep drainage ditch, which I figured we're going to face plant, and there's no way this ends well. I had the foresight to kill the ignition. And after I went across the highway, the ditch was steep enough. I don't know how we didn't face plant at the bottom, but we came up to the very top of a very steep embankment. And then when it got flat, the whole thing just stopped. And I thought, how could that be that neither of us was hurt? We weren't hit by a car, and then ultimately my daughter had a vision later that it was one of God's angels saving us, and interestingly enough, my daughter's name is Christy. She's 26 Christmases ago. I held my sister Christy's hand as she died. She was killed in an automobile accident. And my wife happened to be pregnant with this Christy. And so this gets to be quite unusual because we had 3 ultrasounds that said Christy was going to be a boy, my daughter, Christy. And after she died, my mother said, you know what, I think you're going to have a girl. My sister Christy died Christmas Day. My daughter Christy was born on May 19, 5 months later. But I called my mom. I said, Mom, you're never going to guess what? She says, you had a girl, didn't you? So you sit there and you look at that. Yeah. And you have to wonder, in my mind, those are both beyond miraculous. You got the ultrasound and they're telling you time and time again, you're having a boy. And then suddenly, no, Now,
Yeah.
resolution's gotten better, but I'm going to call both those miracles. And then even, my sister, you know, I think it's true. Only the good die young. I don't know what God's plan was, but it was time for her to go home. And I don't wish that on any parent, but certainly that was profound. And then, we could start looking at really any interaction with patients. When we're actually there, we've seen these wonderful miracles. And why not every time? That might be the more important question. So,
Wow.
My wife, she had a very traumatic childhood, and long story short, you can get her story. It is public on YouTube. I did an interview with her on You're More Powerful or Heal with Dr. Fred. But anyway, her stepfather was a leader in a satanic cult.
mm,
And when she was 2 years old, he tried to murder her and drown her. She lived in Erie, Pennsylvania. Tried to drown her. That's why she hates being cold now. Put her in a frozen lake, right? Cut a hole through the ice and tried to drown her. She actually crossed over
Oh,
and came back. And she came back with these psychic gifts. And it's so fascinating because like when you look at you fly, how did you make it across the highway without getting hit? Like we've all had
yeah.
that experiences, and it's like I would, there's things that I can't explain that, traumas that where you could have been killed, but you weren't, that angels carried you. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, how do you gain that wisdom of a near death experience without actually dying and coming back? Like, I'd like to, avoid the trauma, not actually have to die, but we can actually find that within ourselves without having to literally have a near death experience.
Well, I think it's the crowd you hang with, right? So you start looking at the value of association when you start spending time with people that are on a path and even further along than you. You're more likely to gain that insight, right? There's a proverb that says, hang out with five fools, you'll likely be the sixth. So why not hang out with five wise people? Why not hang out with five people spiritually involved? Why not hang out with five people committed to making the world better? And that's the joy of these podcasts, right? We get to share ideas, and we're going to attract the people that want the message, and hopefully we inspire them to grow that message and pay it forward.
yeah.
Absolutely. So tell us about your life now. Like what's your purpose now? What do you see your vision for the future? What are you up to? Because you've been in practice a while, man. I mean, you've made an impact in this physical plane. So
Well, thank you for that. So, now as we come into these twilight years, my brother-in-law, who was the chief financial officer for the Green Bay Packers, retired this last year, and he said, "Bob, when are you going to retire?" And I said, "Why would I retire? I'm just having too much fun." So it's not like I have anything I want to get away from. Now I've been, part-time. I see patients 20 hours a week, and that's where I've been for about 10 years. And I feel wonderful to have worked myself into that position. We have 3 children. We have 5 granddaughters. All 3 children are happily married, good spouses. The one that's in Italy right now, right? I sent a picture right in front of the Coliseum. That was my middle daughter. She's planning on having kids, but seeing your kids grow up and be responsible adults and then create good kids, that's a great part. I'll do a little more travel. I'll do some teaching. I've taught over 10,000 hours of seminars all over the world on the topic of functional medicine, kinesiology, chiropractic, acupuncture. I still like doing that. So, I see myself doing more travel, more teaching, certainly always, with patients. And now I'll often show I've treated elite athletes, world champions from every major professional sport. And I usually start out the talk saying, I treat elite athletes for my resume, but I treat everybody else for my soul. And so
absolutely.
when we see people coming in, and you just know there's a whole lot more in them, that if we just give them the right nudge, they can access it. And maybe it is that little spillover. So, I think about when I saw Mike Wickers, and he changed my life. He changed my life by being a great doctor, but by being a great human. And I remember telling that story. I was teaching a seminar in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And there's a chiropractor right down the street from Dr. Mike. And she said, "I wonder what would have happened if you came into my office that day." Because we have that quote, we never know what we may think, say, or do, and how it may affect millions tomorrow. Well, literally, Mike Wickers did that. We have an opportunity to do that every day. So why
So
not plant good seeds as often as we can and, protect them and water them and then see where the harvest goes?
Absolutely. So you gonna spend your last days on the
Ha.
table traveling, you think?
Well, we'll see. Yeah, I would bet that I'll be doing quite a bit of that and even more, but we'll see.
Nice. Well, hey man, we're kind of at that magic time again. So Joe, anything you want to add?
no, I'm normally not so quiet, but I didn't want to get into a coffin fit or something when I was talking. I guess my one question, when you got out of school, kind of going back to your story, you had gotten out of chiropractic school. We have so many docs that listen to us that are either just starting out, do I open my own? Do I associate? Maybe some people out there struggling. Like what was your step? Like when you got out of school, what was that step? And then obviously you've taken that first few steps, whether they were good ones or bad ones, and you've become a very successful person on multiple levels. Like what, how did that happen? How did that basically develop?
Well, there's so many ranges of practice managers and practice ideas. And there was a guy named Dan Golden back then. And he had every type of practice from the high tech fluoroscopy and, everything else. And, he said, I learned that the way I want to practice is keep it small, keep it all. Not a lot of modalities, not a lot of staff, not a big space. And then people come in, you treat them like you want to be treated, you provide good care, and, good piece of advice and maybe some wisdom and they go on their way. But I like that keep it small, keep it all philosophy. So that's what I did right out of school. I kept it small, kept it all. And that worked so well, I expanded dramatically and fast. I had 4 different associate docs, 6 different
Yeah.
massage therapists, multiple colon therapists, on-site nutrition store, off-site nutrition store. And you know what? I didn't like it. Instead of being a doctor, I suddenly became a manager, a businessman. And
Uh,
that's not what I was there to do. Instead of being happy when I showed up at my office with such a good opportunity to help patients, it's like, what fire do I need to put out today?
Yeah.
So, I let that all dissolve and I more or less went back to keep it small, keep it all. But
Mm.
what I can tell people is if you are ready to start a business on your own, or even think you're even close, do it if that's your ultimate goal. But if you need to get some reps in terms of adjusting, if you need to understand business, if you need to understand patient flow evaluation, stuff like that, well, then get a good associateship, but make sure it's a win-win. You want to work for a doctor that definitely is heart-centered. And then ultimately you'll learn more from that interaction than you will anything else. And, you know, I certainly have stepped up to mentor students having taught all over the years. And I tell them all the same thing. Practice where you want to practice how you want to practice, and always treat others like you want to be treated. And you've got a formula for success.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you do have that, I mean, Joe and I coach, man, get a great coach. Because I find my experience was you better be, if you're going to go in somebody's office, you better be very specific because many times associates learn more of what not to do than what to do.
Yep.
So
Right.
you either, a lot of times you're better off get the coach that you resonate with that has a great track record, is aligned with your values, and will take you by the hand and show you exactly what to do. And sometimes it's a little scarier, but if you're willing to work and you're willing for your feet to hit the pavement, that's what I tell people. Like when they're opening a clinic, hey man, I can show you what to do, but I can't do it for you. So
Yep.
one thing, your feet got to hit the sidewalk. You got to go out and build your practice, and I'll show you exactly how to do it, but I can't do it for you.
Bob, let
Uh,
me ask you, when you look at some of our people, chiropractors coming out, there tends to be, and there always was. I went to national and coaches, mentors, I never know really what to call it, but the there wasn't always a lot of support or alignment with that. And and I see it even now. I see so many people that are either unwilling, uh, non-motivated to bring somebody on, to hire somebody. What is your thinking as to what that is? Why is that? Do you have a handle on that or an opinion on that?
Well, I have an opinion. I don't know how accurate it is. I think it's scarcity mentality,
Yeah.
where people don't just think the pie is not big enough. I mean, see such a small portion of the population. All we got to do is educate people and we'll have more people than we can treat. But
Yeah.
when I got out of school, I started my first practice with only $5,000 and I've never had debt. So
Yeah.
you can start small. I did that, but what I originally planned to do was, rent a room from chiropractors that had bigger clinics that weren't busy. So I had a list of about 25 of them that were near me that I wanted to do. And I sent them all a letter and said, any chance I could rent a room from you? Let's make it a win-win. I won't need your staff. I won't need all 25 turned me down.
Huh.
And they didn't want the competition. They said, look, the market's tough. We don't need another chiropractor in the neighborhood is basically what they
Wow.
said. So
Wow.
scarcity definitely was the mindset behind that. But hopefully we all know there's plenty to go around for all of us. There's no shortness of sick people. There's no shortness of ignorance. So we've got to educate and get them better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing, man. Is you look at be more concerned with the people that aren't going to chiropractors than the ones that are.
Yep.
Right.
That's saying teach generational patterns, man. Family members. So I mean,
Well,
that's
like so
another
few people,
whole thing.
and there really is a small amount. I mean, it's growing obviously, and there's certainly a better exposure. I mean, social media has been actually fantastic. I know a lot of times you hear people get critical on it, on some of what's out there, but really, I mean, you have for the first time ever, you have the ability of cameras in a chiropractic office showing people getting adjusted. And, I have some people like, oh, it's bad to show this or that, it's the Y strap or this or that. But, I don't care what it is. Chiropractor, something moves and the guy gets up and says, "Oh my God, I'm so much better." Like that isn't bad. That isn't a bad thing. How is that a
No.
bad thing? So, and it takes away that I think that unknowing that
Mystery.
mystery, yeah, that often I think was, what's it like to go in a chiropractor? And you realize, hey, he's a guy, he's a woman that, just like anyone else is out there to make a difference. And she looks professional, office looks great, people are normal, they have health problems, they come in and, I think there's so much benefit there, but there's still overall, I mean, the number of people that go and go regularly because, I always say just make it simple. Going to a chiropractor is good for you. I mean, it doesn't have to treat blindness and cure it in an effort to have efficacy, an effort to have value. I mean, I eat good. I didn't start off blind in the morning and ate, a healthy meal and took omega-3s and I woke up and I could see, and that's the only reason I'm going to eat good. I mean, I'm eating good because it's good for me and my body and my physiology. So getting adjusted and having a healthier spine and nervous system is critical and it's good for you, right? So yet there's so few people that utilize that on a planet. And so the idea, like you're saying that, and I don't disagree with it, there is a scarcity, but the idea of just opening yourself up and realizing, I'm a big Jim Rohn fan. You're dropping names that I love all day long, Ziegler, and I mean, all these guys I listen to, it's crazy, right? But, Jim Rohn said one of those amazing moments in his life was when he heard, you feel hopeless. You're stuck somewhere and you feel hopeless. He said, I heard that I could basically have more because I could be more. I could be bigger. I could be better. So in making myself bigger and better, I could have more and obviously be more and have a bigger impact. And I think in the end, that's the reality of it. If you could take where you are as a chiropractor and improve a little bit of your communication, a little bit of your talent, a little bit of your skill set at the table, a little bit maybe business management, right? I mean, how much more profound effect would you have the people that walk through your door because they're going to stay, pay, refer? And then how much more of a ripple effect is that going to have? And then just like your life was changed by another chiropractor, right? So then somebody comes to them and says, my God, look at this guy. Like, wow, he's healthy, he's good looking, he's got a great office, he looks happy, he's not starving, he loves what he does. Like, I think we forget how impactful that is to grow the profession. Like the idea that if I'm sitting there as a young, impressionable college student, not knowing where I want to go in my life, And you go into some office and some guy's miserable as a chiropractor and living in scarcity and life sucks and insurance sucks. And oh my God, you know, versus somebody out there who's loving their life and has a great life. And, you know, that's going to decide what a lot of people choose to do and where they want to hang their hat and where they want to make a difference in the world, you know, because they're not all going to be chiropractic family members. They're not all going to have the chiropractic miracle like, you know, many of us have had. So, you know, so just being that person, you don't realize how impactful that is to influence other people to bring them into the profession. And yet, like I said, we have such a small penetration to change the planet. We have so much more work to do. We have so many more chiropractors that we need to train. We have so much more conversations that we need to have, the right conversation that we need to have to really have an impact, if we're going to have the impact that we all want and we all talk about, but the impact we are that we're meant to be here, I truly believe, to change the world. Yeah.
Profoundly well said. You know, heck, when I look at my mentors, the ones that I really bought into, they all showed up like you're talking about. You could tell everything about them was lined up with their mission and purpose. And that's as powerful as it gets when you know what you're here to do and you go after it passionately. You're likely to get it and enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Well, I think on the last thing on that too, man, is when you're spiritually connected to your purpose and you know that's why you're here in life, man. There's no accident you're a chiropractor, right? You go back to the old philosophy of chiropractic, you know, you didn't choose chiropractic, chiropractic chose you. You chose it before you came in.
Yeah.
You know, it was just a matter of how you went through your human life to discover it. So,
I
so
say
that's
God didn't
cool.
spend eternity to make you and make a lousy version of you to make junk. You know, God makes miracles, makes phenomenal things. So you're automatically phenomenal. So be phenomenal, you know.
Absolutely.
Just be phenomenal.
Well, you got any final words you want to leave people with, Dr. Bob?
Well, I always wrap up, you know, letting people know that I absolutely know that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. And that all starts with that word alignment. You know, when you're aligned with God and purpose and body, mind, and spirit, you're going to get there better and faster. And again, I'll give a huge plug for coaching, because the best of the best utilize coaches because they realize it takes their game to the next level. So thank you both for showing up and adding so much value to our world.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother. Well, I think that's about it, man. You know, I would say hopefully the message you got out of this is continue to grow spiritually, man. Grow through your heart. Chiropractic isn't a head thing, it's a heart thing. And we can certainly know the knowledge in our head, being that, you know, you're a longtime CBP doc, right? I mean, there's a lot of head stuff there, but your heart's what comes through your hands.
Yep, absolutely.
That's what builds your practice. So
Yeah.
anyway, great having you, man. If anybody says, well, I want to get a hold of you, I don't know, how would they do that? If they have a question or whatever,
Sure.
do you want to share your information?
It could be thedrbob.com, thedrbob.com, or drbobrakowski.com. Both will get you there.
And what's your podcast?
Good question. I think it's called Dr._Bob_Rakowski. We renamed it a few times, but I think that's the name my team came up with.
You don't get blocked by YouTube or something?
Yeah, well, I'm unfortunately I'm heavily censored on YouTube, right? But hopefully that censorship goes away. Just sharing rock solid health information that, for whatever reason, wasn't as welcomed as I'd like it to be.
Just say bad words
Wasn't
like,
as welcome. There you go. That's very diplomatic.
Wow.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for being a great leader, just a great spiritual being, and just representing someone who's on the continual journey to know who God created him to be. So,
well, thank you so much.
Sir. Love you. Hey, you guys, subscribe, share, and you might want to listen to this a couple times. There's certainly some awesome gems on here. All right. Peace. Take care.
Peace.
Ciao.
Thank you.